Arizona's tough, aren't they? And they're not tough for the right reasons. They're tough because they've been bad for a while. It's been 6 years of them missing the playoffs. 2012 the last time they got there, and they got all the way to the conference finals that year. Now you'll notice I'm using their original logo, and I'm wearing their original logo because people are kind of excited about them going back to the Kachina style for their third jersey, so I figured, what the heck? I made a magnet out of it. I might as well throw it up on the board for the preview. Now, Arizona / the Winnipeg franchise, not a really proud tradition of making the playoffs. 19 out of 39 years they've made the playoffs, and no cup to show for any of it. Now, Rick Tocchet's going into his second year as coach, and either he's good or he's bad, and it really depends on how you view it. GM John Chayka, either he's good or he's bad, depends how you look at it. He seems to be pretty good at getting his team to look like they're spending money when they're not. When they're getting guys who are just not going to play, but it gets them to the cap floor. And insurance money and all that. Anyways, it's a system that I think the NHL will address in the next collective bargaining agreement. But that being said, it is a system that's keeping these guys at the cap floor. If you force Arizona not to take on money like Boland, like Hossa, who are dead contracts sitting on their cap, you might be forcing them out of Arizona. I can't see the NHL doing that. Now you look at the last 5 years. 70 points last year, 70 the year before, 78 the year before that, 56, 87 being the highest point in 2013-14. Now this past season, 70 points is a little more impressive than it looks when you consider they were winless in their first 12 to start the season. It was insane. It was insane. And I even had to put out a video titled "Everything is Wrong with the Coyotes." And everything was. And while it looks better right now than it looked then, I still have some issues with this roster. Their top 5 cap hits. Derek Stepan leads the way. Ekman Larsson's next. Goligoski's next. Yeah, the names in blue, I'll get to those in a sec. Galchenyuk's next, and Demers is next. Now, when you look at the 5 guys that they're paying, I think both Goligoski and Demers are probably making a little bit more than you might want for what they do for the team. Goligoski a little bit past his prime, and Demers isn't even getting top 4 minutes for the most part. And Galchenyuk, I think his money's good. Larsson's is fine. Stepan, I don't know about having Stepan as your number 1 paid player, because Derek Stepan, while I have him here as the plus player, meaning he had a much better season than I had anticipated he might, I wouldn't want him as a first-line center. I would ideally want him as a second line. Now in blue, Boland and Hossa. Boland makes the same amount of money as Ekman Larsson. Goligoski's just above Hossa. So if we were doing a top 5 and including guys who won't play, Hossa and Boland make it. So you get a crappy contract. You talk to John Chayka, he's like, all right, but it's not going to be cheap, and you end up having to give up guys you'd rather not. The minus player, all I wrote up here is it better not be Strohm. And I say that for a reason. So Stepan is their number 1 center, right? Dylan Strohm, depending on who you ask, either he's starting to show promise or he's a bust. If your opinion is that Dylan Strohm is a bust, you didn't watch him play during the last quarter of the season. When they called him up and he started playing, he looked pretty good. He didn't produce the way that I think we might expect a number 3 draft pick to produce, but hey, he did show that he has NHL potential. If he's the minus player, this team is so screwed this year. Top 6 forwards, likely Galchenyuk, Stepan, Keller, that's fine. But then it gets kind of muddled right away. Panik, Perlini, Dvorak, Strohm, Grabner, Fisher. It's muddled. Because I don't know that Panik is a top 6 forward. Perlini could be Dvorak or Strohm. Again, if Strohm ends up being the third line center or lower, it's likely going to be another long season for Arizona. Grabner, Fisher. If Grabner is the New Jersey Grabner instead of the New York Rangers Grabner, and Fisher ends up being second line, you can see this is a very volatile sort of lineup. Top 4 defensemen, a little more steady. Ekman Larsson, Hjalmarsson, Chychrun, Goligoski. Honorable mention to Jason Demers, who does play top 4 minutes in some games in some situations. And their defense is solid, but unspectacular. Outside of OEL, offensively, not fantastic either. Goligoski, as I said, I think his best days are behind him, and that contract could start looking worse as soon as this year. I have to mention Connaughton and Demers because, again, This top four isn't stellar, but Connaughton had double-digit goals this past season, and Demers can play top 4 minutes if Goligoski needs a break. And Lawson Krause is a guy I want to mention because Lawson spent all year in the American League. Does he get called up this year? Does he get a chance to play, or is he just an American Hockey League player without the NHL upside and just going to be taken as or mentioned as a first-round flop from here going forward? Additions. This is where it gets interesting. Galchenyuk, Grabner, Hinostroza, Osterley, and Hudson Fasching, who got added from Buffalo. One of those forgotten, but he played 5 NHL games last year, and he'll get every chance to make the Coyotes because the Coyotes have made it clear over the last few seasons, if you play well, you will play games. Now, the argument people might make is, well, they're a terrible team, so of course you got to put anybody in if they play well. Osterley, I think, is a very nice number 7 on the blue line. It's pretty solid. And Hinostroza, I think, does for their bottom 6. It gives them a little bit of energy, and it gives them a little more depth there. Now, I'm a little concerned about Brad Richardson still being on this team because Brad Richardson did not have a very good season. And I honestly thought he was probably going to retire. I'm glad he's still playing. Brad Richardson was one of my favorites in Vancouver. But he is definitely, if you want to talk about somebody on the back 9, he's definitely there. He's pretty much on the 18th hole, teeing off, and he's had a very solid career. Might end up in my Hall of Fame at some point. Antti Raanta, Darcy Kemper. So Raanta proved himself in the second half of the season after fighting injuries in the first half of the season. Kemper, on the other hand, played pretty well. I'd written off Darcy Kemper as an NHL goaltender, and he played relatively well, and now he's in Arizona. And we'll see if that translates to Arizona as well. Or was this just magic he had found, and now that he's in Arizona, he's going to lose it? We'll see. Ideally, Raanta plays 55 games. Kemper plays in the 25 to 30 range. That would be good. And their MVP, Antti Raanta, if this team is going to knock on the door, if they're going to get anywhere near the playoffs, Raanta has to stand on his head as he did this past season. He had a 929, I believe it's 929 save percentage. He played fantastic. Remember, this is behind a team that wasn't very good. They were 12 games below 500. They got off to that abysmal start. Last 5 years playoffs? No. So for them to get anywhere near it, Raanta has to be the MVP. He has to be the guy that's dragging them there. It's a tough call. It is. Because there are other wild cards. Rookies, Barrett, Hayden, I've got as number 3 on this list. There's an outside shot that he'll get his chance to play. Definitely John Chayka's high on him. Took him higher at the draft than anybody expected. He is a center, and as I mentioned, they do need a center in there. If you had a star center and Stepan drops down to 2, if Strohm can be that top line center and Stepan drops to 2, Hayden comes in and starts at 3, you might have yourself a team that'll fight for a playoff spot. But again, there's so much uncertainty, and Hayden is part of that. Ilya Lyubushkin, grabbed out of the KHL as a free agent on defense. Jordan Gross, NCAA free agent on defense that they signed this past spring. They will both push for a roster spot, but as I said, their top 6 seems to be set, and Osterley's there is the number 7. So lots of prospects, lots of pieces on the blue line, lots to like about Arizona, but kind of later. So how did the channel vote? Well, the channel's vote went this way. 0.3% of people believe that Arizona will finish first. And if Arizona finishes first in the division, you guys should win at 500 to 1 odds in Vegas. Second place, 1.3% see them as second. 3.7% took them at third. 8.1% took them at fourth. 14.9% took them at fifth. Sixth, 21.5% of the vote. 38.6% of the vote went to seventh. And eighth got 10.6% of the vote. So, with Mr. Marker right here, it would seem that unlike Anaheim that I just did, there's more consensus with Arizona. Sixth or seventh. Channel vote seems to lead towards them being seventh. That's a horrible asterisk. That's just awful. Should close the channel. That's just awful. Better. And I agree. I agree with 7th. I agree with the mob mentality on this one, even though 61.4% of people don't agree with that ranking. And honestly, Arizona's in that no man's land. They are. We like what Chayka's doing. We see that he's fixing some things with the team. Galchenyuk being added, a potential 30-goal scorer, could be huge. If Galchenyuk can play in the middle, and let's say Strohm moves to the wing, you might have yourself 2/3 of a first line. And oh, look, Clayton Keller. But again, it's so much speculation. Because yes, Galchenyuk can play center, but showed in Montreal that didn't really work. But does it work somewhere else? Montreal says, well, it works with Drouin. And then they look at the results and go, wait, no, it didn't. Never mind, don't. But we're going to try him again at center this year because why not? It's tricky. This is a team that could surprise people. This team, it has all of the makings of a team that will all of a sudden jump into a playoff challenging position. And I wanted to rate them higher than 7th. But I couldn't look at the roster as it's currently constituted and say, yeah, they'll finish 4th. They'll knock down one of the both the Alberta teams and maybe a California team, and I couldn't get myself to that level. I think for me with them, I think they're a star player away from really truly being on that upswing towards being potentially a contender. Let's say that Arizona wins the draft lottery. Stop laughing, it can happen. Let's say that Arizona wins draft lottery next year and they end up drafting Hughes. Hughes projects into that middle. Then we're talking about a playoff team. It could be a very long season. If Antti Ranta gets hurt, or if he falls back to his career numbers off of that fantastic season he just had, it could be a long year in Arizona. But it's better than it was when they were at 56 points in 2014-15. And I do think that 500 is something they can hit this year. I think they can hit 80 points and go higher and show that upward motion, that upward movement, while still kind of hoping for a lottery win. So there you go. Both the channel and myself seem to agree on 7th place, which means they're not going to finish 7th. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Do not forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, just happening upon this video. And there's my second preview of the day. I'll be doing 2 of these every day. And I'll talk to you again soon.